So welcome back, everybody. How are you doing? This is the Transform Network podcast, and we are so blessed to have a general with us today. We have Apostle Ryan LeStrange. Apostle Ryan, I've been watching you since I started my faith journey over like almost 10 years ago. So I honestly have been so blessed by your life. So to actually be sitting here with you right now and to just be interviewing you about your book is just a total blessing for me. Thank you so much for joining. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling amazing. We're just talking before we got going, and God is really moving in this hour. And so I can't wait to unpack some of what he's doing. And I'm watching you as well and seeing you emerge on the global scene in such a profound way. So I'm excited about what the Lord's going to do today.
Praise God. Amen. Amen. And I am blessed by your new book. I'm actually going to hold it up. I'm going to hold the book up, Exposing Emotional Manipulation. This book is really, really powerful. I was reading this book and I was like, the nations need to read this book. And I think it's really timely for certain things that, I've seen, that I've faced, that I've, navigated in ministry. And I really want to dive in and ask you a few questions because, I just think we need to know. There's a lot of emerging prophets who are watching, a lot of emerging apostles who need your wisdom and advice. And I want to say, what would you say to the prophets who are currently emerging right now and they are dealing, I know you dive into this in your book, but the prophets who are currently dealing with emotional manipulation in leadership and they don't know how to get out because they feel like they're going to get cursed, they're going to get harassed by demons, people are going to turn on them. What would you advise to those people who are navigating situations like that currently?
Well, I would say, first of all, once you get that awareness, I'm being manipulated, that is the exit sign being lit up for you, that the Lord is saying you can't stay in this situation. Now, you might become aware of it spiritually, and it might be a seasonal journey of getting out of it, but you can't move in fear of them cursing you, because the thing you have to realize, especially as a prophet, when the Lord deals with you, he touches your mouth. No, people can affirm that, but they can't undo that. And this is the thing David exemplified. This is the thing Jeremiah exemplified. No matter who disagrees with our mantle, the mantle did not originate with another human. Ooh. It originated with God. So you have to walk in confidence, and you have to walk in humility. Sometimes I've learned in my journey, some of the worst seasons I went through, even when I was mistreated, there were so many lessons. And if you take on the same spirit as the person that is attacking you or mishandling you, you're going to fall under that. And you don't want to do that. So you have to navigate in prayer. I see this, it's not right, but I'm not going to move in a spirit of retaliation. I'm going to move in wisdom and humility.
So good. I feel like I've met some people. I've actually had to disciple some people. They were in situations where they were going through emotional manipulation. And I think even talking to sometimes the spiritual father, spiritual mother dynamic, when it was time for them to be released, they were told, you're never going to work again. You're never going to be. How would someone even go about sometimes break? I know some people who they literally came to me and they had not been in work for over 3 years after a situation like that. They'd done the due diligence. They'd gotten the release. They had to they got free, but now they're still battling certain curses. How can you speak to that in the sense of how we can actually break some of these things if they do find that it's actually manifesting in their life?
And it does, because manipulators use curses and threats. And there's a legitimacy in the spirit realm to curses, because when God created, he used words. The only thing he didn't use words to create is the creation of man, in which he gathered up the dust of the earth and then breathed. But every other thing was created by words. So when your leader, when somebody that is over you in the Lord curses you, it's one of the most powerful proclamations in your life. And so first thing, the opposite of a curse is a blessing. If we look at biblically, men were commanded to lay their right hand, the hand of authority, on their children, on their wives on the children as well, and bless them. And with the power of a blessing, there came an endowment to prosper. So one of the first things you do, you recognize there's a curse. I'm going to come out of agreement with it, because agreement is one of the most powerful spiritual principles. To touch and agree concerning anything, it shall be done. So I'm not going to agree with what they've said over me. This is not what God said. I bless them, I love them, but I reject this curse. I send it back to hell, 1. And then 2, I'm going to do the exact opposite. Wherever they've tried to curse my life, I'm now going to release the power of a blessing. And then 3, hopefully in your recovery, you find some atmosphere, group of people, other leader that will come in and actually be a blessing. But sometimes that's a journey, right? Because you feel like I'm gun shy now. I served this other place 10 years and they cursed me on the way out. And that's okay. I used to have this feeling like you need to go in immediately and get, no, because these are relationships, not checking a box off. So it's okay to go through your healing process, but eventually you get connected somewhere that's pouring life into you.
Wow, that's so good. I mean, I really want you to address the difference between, if there is any, emotional manipulation and emotional witchcraft.
Okay.
This is something that you speak about in your book, and I feel like we need to unpack it because a lot of people don't realize they're under witchcraft.
Yeah.
What you just explained, under some of these strange things. They're wondering why their life is going left. Can we dive into what is emotional witchcraft?
Yeah, emotional witchcraft is when we start to mishandle people and relationships. I take it from Galatians, where one of the fruit of the flesh is witchcraft, which tells me that witchcraft is not just spells and incantations. That's very overt witchcraft. But then there is covert or low-key witchcraft, and it's rooted in rebellion. So how is it rebellion if I'm trying to manipulate you to do what I want you to do? Because God has a will for you. And we're in the new covenant, which says, as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they're the sons of God. God does lead us into relationships. Relationships have parameters. They have requirements, all of that. So if my leader says to me, hey, to be an elder in this church, you got to come to Wednesday morning prayer. That's not necessarily emotional witchcraft. But when my leader starts to throw tantrums, gaslight, ghost me, go silent on me because maybe I had a family crisis and couldn't make it and I went through all the proper channels to let them know, now we're getting on shaky ground. And emotional witchcraft is breaking the will of God in order to enforce the will of a person on another person, often contrary to the will of God. And the emotional side of that is it's the utilization of either the victim's emotional status or the perpetrator's emotions to achieve the end goal. So if I'm trying to do emotional witchcraft on you, I'm either discerning something in you that is an open door for me to control you, or I'm using my own emotions, ghosting you, anger, accusation, to back you down into intimidation. I'm not letting the Spirit of the Lord lead you. And as a leader, I'm not equipping you, I'm bullying you.
You spoke about this pertaining to accusation.
Absolutely.
My goodness. And also what you just said in terms of the intimidation that and the threats almost that try to come forward. And I really want you to speak into the area. Is it just leaders? Can it be friends? Can it be family, Apostle?
Yeah. So I think it's chapter maybe 4 in the book. I talk about types of manipulators. And one of the types is the bold boss. So this is somebody that they don't come to play unless they organize the event. So if your family's having a barbecue, the bold boss manipulating your family, the one that does emotional witchcraft by pouting, accusing, attacking, you don't support me, makes a huge deal out of everything. They're the one that won't participate if they're not in charge. You set the barbecue at 6, they demand it's at 4.
My God.
And there's really no logical reason for this. It's the exertion of their own will, which is very witchy because they're trying to get you to bow always to their will. Healthy relationships have an ebb and flow. It's a two-way exchange. So if I'm just taking from you, that's not a healthy relationship. So yeah, it can be family, it can be friends. You know, I see a lot of people get delayed in their destiny because of the wrong friends. Your friends are some of the most intimate connections in your life. And whatever God has given you, I say it this way, one yes will require a whole series of no's. You're going to the nations, I'm sure you're having to say, no, I can't go to coffee today.
Yeah.
No, I can't do this. If you got friends that are insecure, they're going to get very angry. You know, when God promoted me, I lost some of my key supporters in Inner Circle, and I was shocked. But I realized they only supported the non-promoted version of me. They couldn't handle the promoted version.
Wow.
And I had a choice, either bow to their witchcraft, which was filled with accusation. And these were people that saw the prophetic destiny, that spoke it out of their mouth, that prayed for it. But when it manifested and my life rhythm shifted, they kicked into control mode through accusations. And lastly, let me say this. I've never met a demon that's not an accuser.
Oh,
So where there's demons, there's accusation.
Wow, that is so good. You just said something even earlier on where you said that they will monitor doors that they can use
100%.
to cause you to bow. Can you speak to that? And how can we really work to close those doors? Because I sense that they'll try and look for maybe people pleasing, those types of those things. Could you speak into that area, how we can be vigilant about that?
Yeah, I think this is what I say, and I've seen people debate this, but I stand pretty solid on this. I believe your healing as an individual, because you have the authority of Christ in you, is your responsibility. God sends people. If we look at the 5 leadership gifts, apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher in the New Testament, and there are other gifts, but those are the 5 dominant. We look at those. The Bible references them in accordance to grace, meaning that I could get a prophetic word myself if I get in prayer long enough, but many people don't. So God sends the prophet to activate you, to speak into your life, to give you revelation, but it is your responsibility to say, wait a minute, God, I don't want to stay in the rut that I'm in. Again, I'm not trying to victimize or shame people who've been through stuff, because I've been through a lot of stuff. But I realized at the end of the day, not my spiritual father, not my pastor, not my friend, not even my spouse was responsible for my commitment to healing. So what leaders can do is, leadership is painful. The art of leading is painful because there's an element of sacrifice. And one of the mandates of leaders is we're entrusted with the pain of people. So what does it look like if I know something really dark and deep about somebody in my inner circle and then they betray me? Do I take that knowledge that was gained in a place of safety and security, and now because they've acted wrong to me, do I broadcast that? If I'm not whole, I'm going to do that. But in my opinion, that is indecency. You were entrusted with that pain as a leader. So manipulative people are artful and skillful in finding a pain point, like rejection, like people pleasing, and saying, okay, I need to build my international ministry. This person over here is a people pleaser. I'm going to have them working night and day. It doesn't matter if their family's falling apart. It doesn't matter if they're going broke. It doesn't matter what's going on. And when they don't do one thing, I'm going to curse them and cast them to the side.
My gosh.
And I think the problem with that is that as leaders, we're not doing due diligence. We've got to be healthy, because how can we lead if we're not healthy?
Wow, this is phenomenal. I'm just eating all of this up. This is amazing. I think one of the things that I love about the book, and ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this, I think you need to go and click the link and buy it. Okay, I want you to just speak, Apostle Ryan, about some of the things that you also spoke about to do with emotional manipulation and emotional witchcraft. And that was actually about seducing spirits, right? A lot of the time, people don't even know that. I think you mentioned this as well. Ambition can seduce, right? Especially for the emerging prophets who are watching this and all these things. There's going to be opportunities dangled. And there are so many people obsessed with their calling. They're obsessed with, like, me, myself, and I want to, all of these things. I think that it's really important for us to be aware that there will always be a counterfeit that tries to come and prey on your desire for ministry, for what God has called you to do. Can you speak into this? Because I'm here, like, I meet a lot of people, they want God to use them, and some of them have been shipwrecked because they followed after the wrong thing.
Ooh, this is loaded. So the more gifted you are, the more seduction's going to come your way.
Oh,
so you need to know that, because people with spiritual eyes, so the spirit is a dimension, and you can enter in and out of that dimension according to portals. Now, this is why as prophetic people, we got to keep our portals very clean. That it's the blood of Jesus, it's the word of God, right? But people that are not as sanctified, even if they love the Lord, but they're messy, they can go into the spirit dimension and have a sense there's greatness coming on her life. So what they'll often want to do is attach themselves to greatness. I had the very interesting experience of having 2 spiritual daughters who were worship leaders who blew up globally in a good way, just almost seemingly overnight. It wasn't overnight because I knew the backstory, but boom. And now they're doing stuff larger than I'm doing, right? Wow. But I saw that on them. many years before. When they began to explode, I did not try to harness that for my own gain. I wanted to champion it and support it and say, look, you're doing something over here I've never done before. So I can give you wise counsel to keep you grounded as a person, as a vessel, as an instrument, but you're operating in areas. God's given you doors of utterance that he didn't necessarily give me. And the problem with seduction and connecting to the wrong people is sometimes, you know what I think happens is we're frustrated because the thing we know God's called us to do is taking too long. And so the enemy sends a shortcut. This is what an Ishmael, right?
Yeah.
And so somebody comes, oh, you could do this, you could do that. I remember I had worked on a television project many years ago before podcasting and everything, when television was the number one thing. I'd worked on a television project for about a year. I was so excited about this. Everything was greenlit on a network, and then the network sells at the last minute after a year of work. And I am just so discouraged. I want to give up and quit. And I end up sitting in an office with a pastor who knows the leading Christian television networks in the world at that time and says, I could get you on here, I could get you on there, I could get you on here. As he's talking, I feel this nauseous feeling. I didn't have a dream. I didn't have a vision. I didn't have a word. I just had a feeling, an unction, an impression. But I knew my spirit well enough to know something is wrong. So I excused myself, never went back, never had another conversation. I realized it was seduction. He was recognizing an unfulfilled part in me. And God had me under a spiritual father who did not operate that way. He didn't operate through opportunity. He operated through character. And even to the point of saying, hey, you know, smaller is better sometimes if it keeps you grounded and where you need to be. So that thing would have derailed me because later that man was arrested. And his church fell apart with horrific crimes and scandal. But I would have been in the midst of that had I listened to opportunity. And that's one of a lot of stories.
What? Wow. That is amazing. And I think, you know, there are sometimes people, they can hear that no, that still small voice of the Lord saying, no, don't go ahead. Don't do this. What would you say to the people who are just, you know, that they're not trusting that no, and they're like on the cusp of it, and they're just like, no, but it's everything that I think it's, I want to force that promise. What would you just say quickly to them?
I think you need 2 or 3 people in your life that love you enough to be honest with you. For me, that's always been my wife. I remember a time that I was offered a job at a very large television network, and it would have been a relocation. It was so many dreams fulfilled. My wife said, absolutely not.
Wow.
God is not in this. It was speaking to everything I wanted to do, but I trusted her voice. And I had a spiritual mother that was similar to that as well. So I think you need to find 2 or 3 people that love you enough to be honest with you. Most of the time, these are the people that irritate you because they don't agree with you, but they'll save your life.
Wow, it's so true. And actually in the book, I feel like that book was just speaking so many things to me. I was like, Jesus, this is amazing. There was one part where you were speaking about favor in relationships.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get you to talk about this because you see so many people these days, they are forcing, especially within the prophetic ministry. This is something I can really say, whereby people don't almost feel as though they don't feel as though they are validated unless they have maybe the right connections. They won't go unless they feel as though they have like the right person endorsing them. Do you see what I mean?
I understand.
And like, it can become toxic. It can really become quite negative if people are just feeling like associations are the only way to get up, and now they're forcing a relationship that's dead. But you spoke into, I might actually say, some prophetic secrets about how to follow favor and how to really follow that and seize it. And I wanted you to talk about that because I know as I was reading and you were talking about the supernatural relationship between David and Jonathan, and how it didn't even make sense because Jonathan literally had a father who hated David. So
it made no sense.
It made no sense. So could you speak, what does it mean to follow favor in relationships?
So when God's connecting you with somebody, there's a favor flow. And here's where we don't see this sometimes. In our own hearts, there's favor. There's certain people that have reached out to me that's like, I want to go to coffee with that person. There's other people, they're great people. There's nothing wrong with them. But going to coffee with them feels like work to me. And, you know, in where I'm at in life, sometimes I've got to do that because it's an investment. The person needs help. But in building relationship, I recognize that flow of favor in my heart towards them and then in their heart towards me. And when that's present, even if timing is an issue, Because I think recently I had somebody that was like, they were trying to get with me for over a year, and we just couldn't make it work. My schedule, their schedule. And then, bam, when it worked, it was like God was all over this. But it wasn't in the sense of tons of dreams and visions. It was more just like there was a flow in this. It didn't feel laborious. It didn't feel difficult. And so track in your life connectivity where your heart flows towards somebody else. Jonathan's heart flowed towards David because he was a part of his prophetic journey. And for prophets, we can struggle, those of us who are prophetic, because God requires timings of hiddenness. And we want so badly, the part of us that feels misunderstood and bruised, and we're deep feelers at times. We want so desperately to, oh Lord, I need this season to be ended. And then God sends a prophetic word through someone. You're going to nations. And it's like, I can't even get out my house right now. But see, you got to go to nations in the spirit before the physical. And these sort of affirmations that are not authentic, they're shortcuts, and they'll end up leading you in dangerous territory. And I think even with choosing a leader, sometimes people look for who can build me the most, who can accelerate my brand the most. When you got God, I told one young man this, I said, here's the issue. You got to get God to fall on you. Heaven needs to land on you strong enough that doors just start opening. When you're trying to kick those doors down, you need to take that effort as a prophet and put it into pursuit of God. And when God falls on you and tells you what you're supposed to do, he's going to favor you. And then there's a favor flow between you and the right people.
Wow, that is so good. I think one of the things that we've kind of brushed upon, we've spoken about, the emotional manipulation that sometimes comes from leaders. I want to now go into the emotional manipulation that can actually sometimes come from the sheep.
Oh, yes.
The emotional witchcraft that can come from the sheep. How does Jezebel sometimes show up with the sheep? And this is a little bit of a loaded question, because I also want you to speak to, you talked about a spiritual mother and a spiritual father. Obviously, my husband and I, we mother and father people as well across the nations. But sometimes people are not looking for a mantle through spiritual parents. They're looking literally for a real actual blood father.
Yes.
Like they're looking for a real be my replacement mother. And this can even begin to put certain levels of intense pressure on a leader and have them kind of feeling like, oh my, and people almost threatening or maybe wanting to leave if they're not getting that level of attention. But the way that I saw it, especially when I've gone to scripture, is whether there is proximity or not, a mantle is actually about following. And Elisha picked up a mantle. Elijah was meant to anoint Jehu and anoint Elisha. He didn't do that. He literally kept saying, go away, I'm going to go here. But Elisha was like, no, I'm going to follow. And he picked up a mantle. Could you speak to how sometimes emotional manipulation, even emotional witchcraft and Jezebelic spirits can be at work when there is that kind of sheep dynamic that can be quite toxic, or maybe unhealed individuals who are putting demands on their leaders that are actually out of alignment?
Well, first of all, you address this as someone being led by a leader. I can't demand that you are the one that brings my healing when you are not present in my wounding. How fair is it for me to say, you've got to heal this thing my father did, this thing my ex-spouse did, this thing my ex-leader did? That's an unrealistic expectation. And so right there out of the gate, there's a piece of idolatry in that. And where idolatry is present, there's witchcraft. We think of idolatry as and this is, I think, something that's so toxic happening in the prophetic right now. If people are preaching idolatry, if you're even honorable towards somebody. The real idolatry that's happening is when we look to people to do what only God can do. You can't heal the wound. I had massive father wounds. I had a very traumatic early childhood relationship with my father. He's gone now. And it was very difficult. I never expected my spiritual father to heal that wound. I also understood that the mentor sets the pace of the relationship, not the mentee. My spiritual father was a world traveler. I didn't even have a lot of these conversations in the early days. Later I did somewhat, but it was like if I wanted to run alongside of him, then I ran alongside of him. Where he's at, I'm there. What he's speaking, I'm listening. I never was expecting, if you don't give me A, B, and C, I'm going to write about you online. I'm going to go tell people. That's very witchcraft in nature, and that's what people do, is when the expectation is not met, They then operate in a form of emotional witchcraft. They do it by dictating the tone, dictating the pace, dictating the expectation. And then let's talk about this. You're trying to pull a pastor's oil out of a prophet. A prophet doesn't carry a pastor's oil. And you were not drawn to that prophet because they had a pastor's mantle. You were drawn because they had a prophet's mantle. But now in the midst of relationship, you want to get offended and demand something they don't have. And this comes from misunderstanding. I think we've got to do a better job teaching this, that a spiritual parent is not a natural parent. And we're never going to be. And so once we recalibrate that expectation, we can short circuit a lot of this.
Oh, that was phenomenal. Oh my goodness. Wow. I do think that nowadays mentees are definitely wanting to set the pace.
100%.
Set the this, set the... When not realizing some of these ministers have been in ministry for like 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Like, it's like they literally have to not only... They have to know you, they have to actually trust you, they have to hear from God for you as well. And they're not just going to give all their time to someone who's just gotten born again like 2 years ago or something, you see, unless the Lord speaks. Like, I really just want to kind of slide into that a bit more and want you to kind of have us dive into how can people identify, even, for example, ministers who have churches and different things, how can they identify when maybe some of these emotional and Jezebelic traits are in action? And I say that because Jezebel's always looking for someone weak.
Yeah.
Right? That she can manipulate. How can prophets and leaders watch out for Jezebelic manipulation that isn't coming from maybe someone just, you know, the regular way that they're coming in that people expect? You know, sometimes people, you know, encounter individuals who maybe are higher up or maybe from like people trying to persecute them on the news to shut their mouth. We know this, we understand. But we want to talk about the subtle ways that Jezebel, what does Jezebel play on so that people can wake up? I know people are watching this right now and Jezebel's at play, but they don't want to admit it. And I really want you to just speak into that area to their heart to get them to cut that umbilical cord.
I think a lot of times Jezebel looks for unfulfilled needs or desires in the life of a person. So if it's a pastor and the pastor goes, man, I hadn't been able to get anybody to run the children's ministry. All of a sudden, here shows up a volunteer that's running the children's ministry, buying groceries. You know, the pastor thinks, oh, I needed to buy flowers for women's ministry. They show up with the flowers before they can ask. But behind it, there's two things. There's exaggerated praise.
Wow.
You know, we call this, I think the new school term is love bombing.
Yes.
People love bomb you in ministry,
yes,
right?
It's
Be
true.
careful of that, because I found the people that are most vocal. I prayed for a leader like you for 20 years. And then here's where they go. They go from that to slamming another leader. I remember I had a lady early on say, the Lord said, you're going to have a healing ministry bigger than, and named one of the lead healing ministers. And immediately I said, no. God doesn't lift me up by tearing somebody else down.
Wow.
But see, thank God I had the ears to hear. So they do that. They exaggeratedly praise you. And then secondly, they start to subtly exalt themselves and make themselves the star of the show. And this could be in relationships too. I gave examples of pastor. Let's say it's just a friend. Same kind of thing. And now someone's going to go, well, wait a minute. Aren't there good people that just show up and serve? Yes. Difference is motive. So when we're dealing with prophetic, we have to learn to listen. You know, there's a word I love, a Hebrew word, yada, Y-A-D-A. It's to know the thing behind the thing. Half of the prophetic is listening and looking. It's peering into the matter. So you're saying to me, Apostle, I love you. You're going to the nation, but I'm listening. What do I hear behind that? Not in a critical way, because you can love people that are broken. We have to. I can love someone and know they've got this issue. But there's a difference in loving someone and yoking myself to them. And that's where we've got to do better. So monitor the sort of exaggerated praise, the comparison, tearing someone else down. And then you could look at practicals. Do they have a track record of terrible relationships? And in every terrible relationship, are they blaming him? Now they do it on social media. You know, they make posts and videos. I don't want you at one of our ministries if you just did that to 5 other ministries. I've tried to practice this in my life. If you contributed to my life in any good way, and I've not always been perfect in this, but if you contributed in any good way, even if some issue emerged between us, I want to have a good recollection of what you did for me that was good, and try to just take that part of disappointment to the Lord, not make that a pulpit. Jezebel people make that disappointment a pulpit, and I think we can look at that fruit.
Wow, so good. And I think as well, you mentioned even things being revealed in dreams in the book. I know there's a lot of dreamers who are watching this even right now. How do you feel like dreams play a part in revealing and exposing the plans of the enemy?
Yeah, well, Job said that God would open the ears of men in the night season for instruction. And so dreams are so profound because oftentimes dream communication bypasses our conscious mind, and it speaks to us things we would never see. I remember a time that I had a person on my leadership team that was problematic, but very nice person. And I couldn't figure out what's the source of this. And it wasn't even something at this time I was thinking about. I went to bed and had a very vivid dream about a very strong sin bondage in their life. And I realized that that was the source of all the other issues. And God utilized that dream to reveal that to me. Now, that's a very clear-cut dream. Oftentimes, dreams are symbolic. So, people will write to me and go, I had a dream. I was in the car with so-and-so, and they were driving. I was in the back seat. That's not a good dream because it says you're out of control of the thing God is trying to do in your life. And if the person in the front is reckless and dangerous, that's the Lord speaking to you to say, okay, wait a minute, there's an issue with recklessness there and danger. Or that person might be representative of an office. So warnings will show up in dreams. God used dream life of Joseph to preserve the life of Jesus multiple times. And I think all of us need to pay attention to our dreams. You can never interpret what you fail to record. The discerning of spirits will show up in dreams. If it's vivid to you, but you don't understand it, write it down. And realize interpretation doesn't have a timestamp on it. It could take 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You look at the symbolism. Is there any biblical meaning? Is there any personal application? And then you pray. And now we have wonderful courses and tools that we can use and analyze it as well. But yeah, God will reveal witchcraft to you in dreams. It's happened to me more that way than almost any other way.
Wow. Do you feel, Apostle, as though those who are operating in witchcraft concerning emotional witchcraft specifically, do you feel that always leads back to a wound? Is that always someone who's been a victim of pain, or can it just be someone who's just out for it?
In my experience, there's always a wound somewhere. Sometimes we don't get to the backstory. Let me give you an example. The bold boss that I talk about in Types of Manipulators, that's usually a person that somewhere they felt out of control. Maybe it's a childhood abuse victim. And so they learned how to control the environment around them. Now, when it started out, it was emotional. Now, here's where we get in the witchcraft part. I didn't say this earlier. Eventually, demons travel through those corridors. And so because we've got these wounds that are unresolved and they have behaviors, demons have mindsets. So we want to cast the devil out. That's the starting point of deliverance. But now there's a mindset that demon brought into your life. And so a lot of this emotional behavior is a demonic mindset. And that controlling person, they're trying to form a sense of safety through control. If I can keep the environment around me under my control, I won't ever be hurt again. The problem with that is you're victimizing everybody in your life, your friends, your family. Everybody knows you're hard to deal with. I had a person recently who was telling me about a young man, and I know this young man that grew up in a very traumatic, drug-infested environment, and they were saying, he's so responsible. He's planning this thing. And I'm listening, I'm saying, that's trauma. While these attributes sound good, he had to become that as a child. That's the only way he survived. And I'm not saying those are bad attributes, but they can be if God has more for you. And so you've got to get healed. So yeah, I think emotional witchcraft generally, I don't want to say it's 100%, but let's say a good 90 to 95% of the time, it's rooted in an old wound. And sometimes the people don't even realize they were wounded.
And when they are not willing to get healed, they're not willing to do the work, like we were speaking about throughout this interview, they're not willing to do anything. They are just adamant that this is how they're going to be and there's nothing wrong with it. We're going to continue to do it, accuse, do whatever. What is the best step for somebody who is on the other side of that? What should they do? If it's not a church, maybe it's not even, maybe it's, I don't know, a friendship or something. Is the best thing to literally put up a boundary and give them a hard no, to give a wall? Or is it, oh, let me just try and, just try. Okay.
You got to use a boundary. And you know, boundaries, I've gotten more flack over talking about boundaries online than just about any other thing, because there's a whole segment of the body of Christ that believes Jesus was consistently passive.
Yes, people are like, don't put up boundaries, that's unbiblical. I think that is crazy. I'm like, God literally said, if you're not holy in my presence, you can't be here.
Right. He has a whole series of boundaries, right? And we look at the ministry of Jesus. Jesus is constantly exiting and withdrawing. They're looking for Jesus. Where is Jesus? He was ministering to the masses. He's gone. That's a boundary in motion. We look at Lazarus. Why didn't Jesus leave immediately and go to Lazarus? Because he moved in the rhythm of his Father. This is where emotional witchcraft comes in. You're moving in the rhythm of your call to nations. What happens when you can't be there when someone thinks she should have been here? If she's a mentor, she should have been here. If she's a leader, she should have been here. Jesus went through the same thing. But here's the thing. When Jesus did get there, because he did what God said and moved in the rhythm of God, power showed up. Do we want people to show up void of power because they obeyed us? Are we going to be the people's prophet? Or are we going to be God's prophet? This is a question that we have to ask. So a boundary is never to punish you. It's to preserve me. Because if God rested, I have to rest. And rest is not always physical. It's spiritual and emotional as well.
So good. Have you ever been in a situation where you were tempted to kind of speak as the people's prophet as opposed to God's prophet due to, like, obviously ministers go through a lot, and the higher you get, the more pressure there is.
Sure.
And I'm sure even if you go to one church, someone else is upset that you didn't go to their church or something like that. Like, how have you even emotionally fortified yourself to ensure that you don't become the people's puppet?
To the first part of the question, I definitely think there have been times I've been tempted to do that. And if I'm honest, in my 30 years of journey in ministry, there's been times that I didn't accurately fulfill an assignment because I was bowing to the pressure of people. And I think if I would say, well, where does that come from? My own desire to not hurt and offend, you know? And I think in today's world with social media, offense is instantaneous. You know, we used to have to wait to find out somebody was offended. Yeah. Now it's viral, it's instant. Yeah. And so how do I guard my heart? I think that I realize my family is my foundation. You know, I'm not one of those people that is in ministry, like ministry is the big deal and my life is secondary. When I was young, it was, honestly, because I think I was excited and exuberant and, you know, all those things. But in today's world, for me, my foundation is my family. It's living as a godly man first, and ministry, while it's an all-consuming thing, it is the secondary. So I think that's kind of how I guard myself, is keep a good root system. And then I'm big on devotion. When I start feeling depleted, I need to pause and fill back up, because when I've faltered in the worst cases has been when I'm depleted. And I think, you know, we can get into a flow. It's odd, and as a prophet, you probably can understand this. The thing that gets us through the doors, the thing that causes us to show up amongst the nations, was that dedication and consecration. But all of a sudden, what do you do when now you're speaking 7 times a week, and before you're speaking 1 time a month? So you were spending 29 days preparing for one speaking engagement. Now you're spending 29 minutes preparing for one. That's the thing that we have to go through. And so I think trying to focus on every calling has a diet. What's the diet for my calling? And aligning with that. And I found it shifted in different seasons of my life. What worked 10 years ago doesn't work today for me.
Wow, this has been so good, so amazing. I want to also just ask you, you know, is there anything in the book that maybe I haven't covered, but that you really feel that you have to share? Because I just want to ask you some of my own personal questions before we round up the interview. So is there anything that you feel as though, hey, this is something that really, really meant something to me? Maybe I haven't covered it, and that you really want to get out there and you want to share with the listeners?
I think just one point, because we've covered so much, but I think I view relationships as God's transportation system. So as much as this book is going to uncover what emotional witchcraft is. It's going to give you strategies to deal with manipulators. It's going to give you in a very practical way. I wrote this book conversational. So I don't know when you're reading if you could tell that, but it's like I wanted you, that we're sitting here and I'm just talking to you. I tried to strip down some of the language, make it easy to understand, but I also really empower you to understand the power of relationships and give you some strategies and thoughts and scriptural keys to build good relationships, because one of the things that's going to change your life and accelerate your destiny is relationships. And that's why Satan fights them. That's why they're where so much witchcraft happens. So I think understanding every time God wants to elevate me, he sends an elevated person. Their mindset's elevated, or their spirit's elevated, their finances are elevated. Something about them is elevated, and that's a sign God wants to elevate me. But here's what I always say. When Joseph shows up, Joseph has been imprisoned, lied on, and enslaved. He doesn't show up bitter. The wrong version of you can show up at the right moment and fall flat. Joseph showed up as the right version of himself. So a lot of times our relationships are not working because we're not working. And that's the one nugget I would give.
Wow. Oh my goodness. You're right. When I was reading the book, I felt like a friend was giving me wisdom and giving me the advice to questions that I had in my heart, and they were just being unpacked and answered. And I think one of the things that you shared, especially to do with relationships, I want to actually ask about this as well. We did speak about earlier, following the favor, right? What would you advise, especially to prophets, okay, where there is not necessarily favor there? You know, God has spoken, right? Like, God has spoken to you about someone. You have dreams of this person. The Lord's always talking to you about them. And then you're like, okay, like, I'm going to just like align and things. But it just feels like closed door after closed door, year after year after year. It's not like 1 year. I'm talking like years, right? There are certain people who God has spoken to them about people. And there's that kind of limbo of being like, God, you've spoken, but that person needs to also reciprocate. What would you say to that? And I think that's why I was talking earlier about that kind of Elijah and Elisha dynamic, in the sense where Elijah didn't want Elisha really around, but there was still something there for him. What would you say to that?
If it's been years and years and years, you might have to pause and go back and say, Lord, did I really hear right? Because there are some times that we're just exuberant. We're excited. I will say there are other times that God is concealing you. I tell this story. I remember years ago, I was in a season of revival, specifically a lot of extended meetings. I'm going here to preach 2 nights and I'm staying 2 weeks. And there was a guy that pastor had emailed me, and he said, God spoke to me, if you would come to my church, it would forever shift my church. I said, that's a great email. We'll pray about that. But that's a lot of pressure too, right? And so this guy starts showing up at every revival meeting I'm doing. Now, 2 of the campuses I was leading at that time broke into revival. We were in revival well over a year. I want to say maybe 1.5 years-ish. This guy was there. God revealed him to me. I started letting him help minister. We built a great friendship. I never went to his church. After that long 1.5 years, 2 years, maybe it was, the Lord said, you need to go back and read that email. It's time you go to his church. Wow. I go to his church. There's a man that can't walk on 2 canes. God heals the man. Revival breaks out in his church. What I don't know is a prophet came to that region years before and prophesied a revival is coming, named the revival. This man grabbed what happened, named that revival. His church has probably quadrupled since then, went into another building, sold one building, got another building. But he was patient and waited. And God wasn't punishing him. So if it's been years, go back and reevaluate. Is this a thing of maybe I'm in the ballpark of the type of leader God's calling me to, but maybe it's not this person? Is there some expression that could be made appropriately within this person's sphere to say, hey, I'm really looking for a more meaningful connection? Sometimes I tell people, I can't do it the way you're wanting to do it, but here's a way I could facilitate that. Come to this gathering I'm having and I'll grab a quick coffee with you to get to know you or whatever. That might be a strategy. Or could it just be that God is concealing you and developing the relationship? I think that's what you got to look through. But if it's been years, I think you have to evaluate it.
Yeah, that's really, really good. Okay, Apostle, I think that we've come to an end. This was absolutely fun. I feel like you've given the listeners wisdom for over 10 years. Like this.
All right, mission accomplished.
Honestly, could just save people's destinies. Thank you so much. As a prophet myself, this is so great, especially as my husband and I are emerging and going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I pray that you really enjoyed everything that Apostle Ryan shared. It has been incredible. So much wisdom. And please do not forget to get this book. If you are looking to get wisdom and even more than you've received in this small time where I've been able to glean and just speak with Apostle, you can buy Apostle's book, Exposing Emotional Manipulation. I'm going to put the link just down in the bio area. Please click it, get your book, subscribe to this channel, and stay tuned for more. Apostle, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful, and I hope to see you again. God bless you.